President Donald Trump told Fox and Friends he's not doing well. In his quest for eternal salvation, he thinks he's really far behind.
If I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's a pretty... I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons...
Yeah, if Donald Trump is at the bottom of the total after all of the things that he's done to help people around the world, well, then that doesn't really bode well for the rest of us either. What's up? This is the 47 Daily Podcast for Wednesday, August the 20th. My name is Mark Kaye. Thanks so much for joining us. Yesterday, Donald Trump spoke to Fox and Friends about what happened with the European leaders who came to the White House and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who came to Alaska last week, and talked about how close they are, or how much closer they are, to a peace deal, and how that is his singular focus. At the moment, Donald Trump is squarely targeted on bringing peace to that region. He wants an end to the war, and he wants an end to the killing, no matter what the fake news will tell you. And man, Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, wandered into her press briefing yesterday and excoriated, lambasted, totally destroyed the fake news media, many of whom were in the room with her, for the lies they were telling about President Donald Trump's peace efforts, his meeting with the European leaders, and most notably, his meeting in Alaska with President Putin from Russia.
However, one thing that has absolutely not changed is the media's negative and downright false coverage of President Trump and his foreign policy accomplishments. From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Initially, the media ridiculously claimed that President Trump was somehow beholden to Russia for even agreeing to have a face-to-face discussion with President Putin inside of the United States. The media said President Trump was making a grave mistake by, quote, legitimizing Putin. They were aghast that President Trump would treat another world leader like a world leader. The media relentlessly attacked President Trump and claimed he suffered a, quote, major defeat for not immediately emerging with a final agreement, even though he said heading into that meeting, this was a meeting to listen and to understand how to move the ball forward. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months, about peace. This is the same president, by the way, who brokered the Abraham Accords in his first term, on top of more than half a dozen other peace deals this year alone, as I just said. We also saw yesterday the president of Ukraine and all of the other major leaders of Europe fly across the Atlantic Ocean to meet President Trump at the White House because of the progress that was made, and that, if you ask the media, failed meeting, but it was not. It was highly productive and it was successful. This is why Americans' trust in the mass media is at a lowest point in more than 5 decades. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace.
That was Karoline Leavitt, literally just in your face media at the beginning, at the outset of the press briefing. But that wasn't all. She continued her tirade, and she continued to put these press people in their places, especially when they asked really ridiculous, stupid, and redundant questions. One of them from the New York Times: President Donald Trump had a call with Vladimir Putin immediately after his meeting with the 7 leaders from Europe, the Chancellor of Germany, the presidents of France and Italy, the Prime Minister of the UK, Volodymyr Zelensky himself, Mark Rutte from NATO, and Ursula von der Leyen from the EU. Yeah, I forget her last name, but it's not important. What's important is that after their meeting, after their roundtable discussion, which was very productive, in which Volodymyr Zelensky called the best meeting he's ever had, Donald Trump excused himself and took a private call with Vladimir Putin. And the New York Times had a problem with that, and Karoline Leavitt had a problem with the New York Times having a problem with it.
On the same page. why wouldn't Trump just take the call from Putin while the other leaders were in the room? He said it would be disrespectful to do that. But why is it disrespectful?
With all due respect, only a reporter from the New York Times would ask a question like that, Sean. The president met with all of these European leaders at the White House 48 hours after sitting down with President Putin on American soil. In fact, there was so much progress in the readout that was given to these European leaders immediately following his meeting with President Putin that every single one of them got on a plane 48 hours later and flew to the United States of America. And if I could just read for all of you some of the statements from those European leaders yesterday, you had President Zelensky himself saying it was a very good conversation. It was really good. We spoke about very sensitive points. The Secretary General, Mark Rutte, it was the president, only because of the president, that this deadlock was broken, but with President Putin by starting a dialogue. So these leaders, who this war is in their backyard, are very grateful that the president took that call and that he was there to provide them with a readout of Russia's thinking on this, something that was not done by the previous administration at all. Catherine.
Yeah. And then she went on to tell another reporter and forced her to admit that President Donald Trump, had he been president for 8 years directly, would have been able to stop this war before it even started, something she begrudgingly did.
Would not have started if he were in office, and
True.
and Putin confirmed that.
It's true. Do you accept that as true? The European leaders do.
Well,
and President Putin himself said that, by the way.
He did say that.
Yeah, but do you accept it? Do you accept that if President Donald Trump had been president, this war would not have started? That's something the European leaders have said, something Donald Trump has said, and something, Vladimir Putin has said. He would not have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump were president because of the weakness of Joe Biden. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. Because of the weakness of Joe Biden, not only did we have massive illegal immigration here in the United States, not only did we have massive crime surging in the United States, not only did we have fentanyl coming over and killing thousands of people a day, murderous thug gang members from Tren de Aragua and MS-13 coming in and raping and murdering our American citizens. Not only did we have all of that, not to mention the Bidenflation, the COVID, and the lockdowns and everything else. Not only did we have all of that, and also the woke stuff, but we had the war in Ukraine begin, which killed thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people now. That's a direct reflection on the weak leadership of Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. And Joe Biden has all of those deaths squarely on his shoulders. Don't even get me started about the unborn babies. We'll get to that in another day. But Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, also had some pretty strong words about these meetings and about Ukraine. And one of the things he said Donald Trump has always been a proponent of and has been dead set on is no more money going to Ukraine.
Since he got into the Oval on January 20th, President Trump has been talking about not sending any more money to Ukraine. We did this economic partnership, which once this conflict stops, could pay off big for the American taxpayer. We can recoup our investment. If Ukraine does well, we do well. If the conflict stops, and the conflict's got to stop for the economic partnership to really kick in, we're going to start with some investments now. So I think President Trump is very vigilant. Right now, we are selling arms to the Europeans, who are then selling them on to the Ukrainians.
And that is something that from day one, Donald Trump has said we can't do. We can no longer give away our assets. We can sell them. We can sell them to NATO, and NATO can disperse them to whomever they want. If they want to disperse them to Ukraine to fight against Vladimir Putin, that's all well and good. But NATO is going to be paying for these weapons. The United States of America is no longer going to be a charity case for killing Russians and Ukrainians in this conflict, which again never would have happened had Donald Trump become president. Which brings us to the security guarantees. There was a lot of talk about the coalition of the willing, who were going to be bringing security guarantees or helping Ukraine defend itself against any future Russian aggression once this war ends. And Scott Bessent also brought up the notion that there would be American boots on the ground, which Donald Trump has said there will not be.
The security guarantees go back to Friday, President Trump's meeting with President Putin in Alaska. And President Trump has wanted to end this conflict that never would have started if he had been president. And he convinced President Putin about the security guarantees, that it is what the Europeans call coalition of the willing. The U.S. will not have boots on the ground, may provide some kind of air support, satellite support. And then yesterday, President Trump came in with a plan. He doesn't do these things randomly, and he knew what he had to do with President Zelensky. It was a very good meeting.
That wasn't flattery. The flattery argument on the part of NBC.
Laura, please. It goes back to, again, in Alaska, that President Trump made a mistake inviting President Putin on U.S. soil, or the flattery. It's all they're demeaning themselves because.
They're demeaning themselves. They're demeaning the president. Or they're demeaning Vladimir Putin. But basically, they just kind of look. They kind of look like idiots. And Caroline Leavitt, she was asked a few times about the boots on the ground question, and she dismissed those as well, as Scott Bessent did and as Donald Trump did. There will be no American boots on the ground in Ukraine. There's plenty of boots on the ground already in Europe. We don't need to send any of ours over there.
The president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
There you have it. Again, more reiteration of something that's already been discussed. That's how the media is. You have to just pound things into their head over and over again, and even then, they really don't understand or comprehend what's going on, or want to, because they're not big fans of President Donald Trump and his peace through strength mentality, which has made the entire world safe again. One of the most amazing things that we always touch on, and I think something that finally is getting its due, is how not only Donald Trump, but his entire team is able to work around the clock to make sure these things happen. Remember, the timeline of this was super tight. Never before have you had two massive summits back to back almost in such rapid succession. Friday in Alaska, there was the Vladimir Putin meeting. Vladimir Putin, his entire delegation, hundreds of Russian business people were brought in from Russia. They were put up in Anchorage, Alaska. There were meetings. Protocols had to be followed. There had to be, everything had to be set in stone. It was the first time the Russian leader had been to the United States in like a decade. It was a huge event. It was an important event, and it was one that was pulled off flawlessly by the team. Then, within 36 hours, they had to turn around another event, a massive event with multiple world leaders coming to the White House for a second summit the following Monday. Monica Crowley, who's the chief protocol officer, talked about how amazing it was and when she found out about the actual second summit.
We were returning from Alaska, which was a very productive meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin. We were coming back to Washington, D.C., and at about 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, while we were still on the plane, the president was making a series of phone calls around the world, and we heard that President Zelensky was coming to the White House at 1 p.m. on Monday. So we essentially had 36 hours to gather 8 world leaders, including 6 heads of state, gather them at the White House, and make sure every detail was taken care of to ensure the greatest environment, Martha, for the most robust, effective diplomacy. And I think we saw yesterday that only President Trump could convene this kind of gathering of so many world leaders on such short notice in pursuit of peace between Russia and Ukraine. You need a president who's a visionary leader, who is absolutely committed to the peace process, and this president is. I mean, he's already settled about half a dozen other world conflicts around the globe. And this one, as the president has said, has certainly proven to be the most difficult, but he is also incredibly committed to ensuring peace for all of the people in that region.
I mean, it does take a lot of people in the White House. There's a lot of folks who are involved in these meetings. It's not just Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and Scott Bessent. It's the entire White House staff. It's the protocol department. They've got to make sure that the cars are there, that the White House is set, that all of the lunch is ready, that there are rooms for various people to meet in. Because keep in mind, when you have 8 world leaders coming into the White House, they're going to want to separate from time to time. They're going to want to take phone calls. They're going to want to meet with their own delegation. And each one of these world leaders, it's not just 8 people coming. They probably bring somewhere between 5 to 10 people of their own. Then you have the massive amount of reporters, more reporters than we've ever seen at the White House for any event. And that is truly something that is spectacular to watch and spectacular to witness. Almost as spectacular as President Donald Trump cleaning up Washington, D.C. Because remember, it's not just the White House that these people are starting to see. It's not just the White House that world leaders are brought to. It's Washington, D.C. itself. And Donald Trump has said, look, as the hub of power for the entire world, we got to clean this joint up. And Caroline Leavitt yesterday said, oh, yeah, we are working around the clock as well to do just that. And it's working.
President Trump's efforts to make D.C. safe again are working. There have been a total of 465 arrests since the start of this operation on Thursday, August 7th. Last night, there were a total of 52 arrests, including the arrest of an illegal alien MS-13 gang member with convictions for DWI and drug possession. Thanks to President Trump's leadership and the outstanding work of both federal and local law enforcement, dangerous gang members like the one picked up last night will not be allowed on the streets of our nation's capital. Other arrests last night included assault with a deadly weapon for stabbing, parole violation for robbery, murder, outstanding warrant for attempted murder, assault on federal law enforcement officer, and felony assault. 4 more homeless encampments were also removed during yesterday's reporting period. To date, a total of 48 homeless encampments have been cleared in Washington, D.C. by multi-agency teams. MPD patrol units are actively working with city officials to locate and clear additional encampments and remove homeless residents off of Washington's streets.
And this is something, again, that President Donald Trump has said. It's not just the crime, it's the homelessness, it's the graffiti, it's the way that the city presents itself to the entire world. And what we've seen here is the need for safety in D.C. because not only do we have 8 world leaders coming into the district for an impromptu mini G7 in Donald Trump's living room, but we also have a ton of tourists that come to the city. We have Congress that works there. We have all of the government workers we need to keep safe. And of course, the residents of DC who are thankful, who are welcoming, who are excited that crime will be leaving, that the gangs will be dismantled, that the criminals will be arrested, that the drug addicts will be cleaned up, and that the homeless situation will be gone. And that DC will not just be a forgotten city, but one of the greatest cities in the entire world, as it should be. Interim DC Department Chief, I don't even know what we call him anymore, Todd Blanche from the DOJ was talking about just how effective these efforts have been so far.
President Trump's goal from day one has been to make this city safe, to make this city a place that we all enjoy being, to make this city a place that world leaders who come to see the president come in and are jealous of, and that's something that we are proud of. And for example, just last night, we arrested over 80 people in this city, including an MS-13 gang member. We took 9 firearms off the street. Since we started this effort, we've arrested 4 people on suspected homicide, over 50 people for drugs charges, and that's in August, and it's just been going on for just over a week. And so what our goal is to empower the police department and empower the leadership in D.C. to know that they can make this city safe again, and it will not be completely safe in 30 days, but we're already seeing results every single night and every single day that the community loves. And by the way, Laura, the same liberal media that's out there criticizing us and saying that we're doing something wrong and we shouldn't have the National Guard, they're the same liberal media that turn off the mics and jump for joy because they can now go to a restaurant without fear of getting mugged. They can now go home and go for a walk with their dog and their children without feeling that they're going to have somebody, a juvenile or somebody come and sucker punch them. And so this is a great thing for D.C. It's a great thing for America. And President Trump has talked about doing this for years. And so it's a good thing that he's doing, and we're happy to support him.
I think everybody's happy to support them. He's right about that. The media, they may report that there's an overwhelming presence of National Guard troops and it's scary and unnecessary. But when the microphones are off and when the cameras have been shut off, they are excited and ecstatic that their city where they live and work is safe once again. You know, it's not just the streets of DC that Donald Trump wants to make safe again. He's also going to make the museums safe from DEI. He's going to make the museums safe from woke. He's going to make sure that everybody who visits DC gets the true American story. He posted on Truth Social the museums throughout Washington, but all over the country, essentially the last remaining segment of woke. The Smithsonian is out of control, where everything discusses how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. We are not going to allow this to happen. And I have instructed my attorneys to go through the museums and start the exact same process that has been done with colleges and universities where tremendous progress has been made. This country cannot be woke because woke is broke. We have the hottest country in the world, and we want people to talk about it, including in our museums. President Donald Trump is erasing woke and DEI and the lies about our history from every aspect and fabric of our being. He's erasing them from our schools and universities. He's erasing them from our government buildings and now from our museums as well. DC, the United States, will truly be one of the most incredible places ever. And don't even get me started on mail-in ballots, which, by the way, we will talk about at length in our second daily podcast, Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. If you don't yet listen to Mark Kaye Saves the Republic, or if you haven't downloaded it, it's easy to find. Go to markkaye.com, MarkKaye.com. Find your favorite platform, subscribe, download, listen, and enjoy.